Hi, my name is Tim, and I'm from the PACESsuccess.net website, and I just want to give you a quick overview of how the PACES work. And in particular, I want to focus on the high school level PACES, and I'm designing this video for someone who maybe is just doing one course, and this is the first time and maybe the only time they're going to work through a PACE course, or it could be a family who's just getting started and wants to use the PACES, or maybe a school wants to just show some parents how the PACES work. So I'm going to make this brief and just give a quick overview. And first let's answer this question: what are the PACES? If you remember being in high school, perhaps you did a textbook where you read chapters, and maybe at the end of a chapter there would be questions to answer and vocabulary to define, and then the teacher would write a test. What they do with the PACES is take an entire course, and so this is an English course, all right, and divide it up into 12 booklets. Each booklet is called a PACE, which stands for a Packet of Accelerated Christian Education. So ACE, Accelerated Christian Education, is the company that back in the 70s designed and wrote the PACES, and they've been revised several times since then. Most of the PACES are in their 4th edition, which has come out in the last just two or 3 or 4 years. Okay. So I showed you this is an English course. They have math, social studies would be history, and of course science, and then this is they call it word building. And then when we get into 9th grade, there's a course here, and this is called etymology. Now, etymology is a 1-year course. It covers the vocabulary and suffixes, prefixes, language, roots, and that kind of thing. It's just a 1-year course. So when a student finishes 9th grade, or at least this level of word building, etymology, there is no more course like this. Okay, so this ends with PACE 1108. But the English starts at PACE 1. There's 12 PACES per year. So you do the math, 12 per year times 12 years of school here in America would be 144 PACES. And so the 133 to 144 would be level 12. That would be the 12th grade level. That actually covers British literature and the English. But each level then is 12 PACES would equal 1 full course. This particular one here, 1105, is the 9th PACE in the biology science course. All right? And so there are 12 that make up the biology course in full. In thinking about earning credits, when a student works through an entire textbook, so here's a biology textbook, work through the entire textbook, take all the tests, and then on their transcript they would get 1 credit for completing that course. Now, most full textbooks like this have 1 or 2 chapters that a teacher may skim over or may skip altogether, depending on how the year's going or how many snow days they had or special field trips or events the school had. But I will just tell you that with the PACES, they have already taken out a lot of the fluff and extra topics, and everything that is in those 12 PACES really must be covered in order to honestly earn 1 full credit. So I don't think that you can try to do only 9 or 10 or 11 of the PACES. Do all 12, okay? And complete your work. We'll talk about the structure of the PACE here in just a minute. So 12 PACES equals 1 course, and 1 full course equals 1 credit. If you think about that, then in a school year, at least in a school setting, we break the school year down into 4 quarters, which would mean we need to do 3 PACES in each quarter. And then you break it down further and realize, okay, there's 9 weeks in a typical quarter because there's 36 weeks in a school year. So that means we need to get 1 PACE done every 3 weeks. Each PACE is about 39 pages, some a little bit more, some a little bit less. But basically, if you take off the 1 day for a PACE test and another day for a self-test, so you have like 13 days to be working in each PACE, then we're talking about doing 3 pages a day. Some days you may need to do 4. Checkups are only like 2 pages long. Every once in a while you'll come across pages, especially in English, where they're writing assignments that may take longer. So you don't want to just get in a habit of setting strictly 3-page goals, but actually look at the pages that you're working on, all right? So let's talk next here about what is the structure of a PACE. Let me take let's take an English PACE here, all right? And on the first page would be a list of the objectives, what the student is going to need to know and do by the end of the PACE. There'll be a Bible verse, a character quality, all those are good things. Usually it's some kind of a cartoon there as well. Then as the students are working through the PACE, at the top of each page generally is where the content is, the things that need to be read and understood, and then there will be assignments below that where they'll answer questions, okay, in order to better master the material. Now I'm going to move to page 11 here in this English PACE, and there is a checkup, okay? A checkup is, think of it as a quiz. It means you've been studying something for 2 or 3 days, and now we need to stop and review that and determine what is really important, and then study it. Just a note to parents and students, teachers, whoever's going through this, treat this like you would a quiz, okay? Look at it to realize, okay, what do I need to know for this quiz? Ask yourself, do I know this? Do I know this? If you're not certain about something, then on a separate sheet of paper, make a note of that. Say, okay, I need to know this. I need to study this. Perhaps it's something to memorize. Maybe you're getting adjectives and adverbs confused, and you need to have someone help you understand the difference so that you can adequately and properly, label the terms in a sentence, okay? So study for it, but then once you start doing a checkup, you should not look back, okay? So we'll come back to that in a minute, but that is what a checkup is. As you work through a PACE, let me grab another one here to illustrate the same idea. All right, so here's a math PACE, and let's see if I can find where a checkup would be. I'm probably whizzing by it here. All right, well, anyways, here in the middle is a PACE test. And that is a final test that the student will do at the very end of the PACE. I'll come back to that in a minute. As the student works through the whole PACE and they get to the end, all right, so this is a social studies PACE, and this one's already filled out. The student got to the end and did a checkup, all right? And this checkup reviewed the last section. And then we turn the page and there's a self-test. Self-test would be kind of like a pre-test that covers everything in the whole PACE. It takes content mainly from the 3 checkups and helps the student realize, okay, these are the things that are the most important. I really need to know these. So they study for the self-test again. As they're doing it, they cannot look back. And then when they're completely done, like I mentioned, there is a PACE test. So that's just a quick overview of the parts. And now let's talk about how to actually do a PACE. I'm going to grab one of these biology PACEs, and particularly I'm going to choose this one because there is a unique part to this one. This is the 3rd edition, and it has a pull-out packet in the middle. All right? So this part of the PACE is all text. It's just diagrams, colorful diagrams, material to read. And then in the middle is a workbook, and it's only attached by 1 staple. And so the best way to separate it is to hold on to the 2 parts and then just snap it. Let me try that again. Snap it apart, okay? And now we have a separate workbook and the work text. Now one more thing before we get started, and this is actually the first point that I have up here on the board, and that is we need to pull out the PACE test. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab the PACE test with 2 fingers and the PACE separately, and then pull it out. And then parents, teachers, this test your students should never see until they're actually ready to do the test. You should never leave it stapled in the middle of the PACE. All right, that would lead to cheating and is going to take away your guarantee that your child, your student, has learned the material. So pull that out and then lock it up somewhere. Okay, hide it in your bedroom if you're homeschooling, or if you're in a school setting, you can put it into a file and lock the door so students cannot have access to the PACE test. This is your final proof, okay, that they've mastered the material. ACE is really based on mastery. And also in the middle of this PACE, and a lot of the science PACEs, there will be a lab, okay? And so I'm going to pull that out as well. And if I'm in a school setting, I'll write the student's name on there, and then when I give them the PACE, remind them that they need to do this before they get to the self-test. And they can do it any day before the self-test. Now those are on DVDs, and those you can purchase from ACE. I'm not aware that they are on the web anywhere. That would be kind of a cool idea, but right now you can only get them by buying the DVD from ACE. So then, let's talk about the next step, and that is setting goals. And as I mentioned earlier, in a given PACE, you probably are going to do 3 or 4 pages per day in a PACE like English or social studies. In this science, these pages are labeled with letters, A, B, C, D, down here at the bottom. And I encourage students to do 2 or 3 pages per day. Let's see, let me find a page here. Up here at the top, it gives an outline and then tells me which pages in this PACE I need to read in order to find the answers for these questions. And so it makes sense that you will read those pages and then answer all the questions related to those pages that you read. Okay? Now, let's stop there. Let's say that a student has gotten to that point. They've set goals. They've read and answered all the questions. The next step then would be to score their PACE. And here at our school, we put the score keys inside a folder that's color-coded to match the subject, and we put the PACE numbers on there, but there are many different ways you can organize your score keys. And then a student will open this score key and open their PACE to the pages that they've done. And then using a red pen, and this is what ACE has been recommending for almost 40 years, that students always use red pens when they're scoring. So they're going to compare their answer to the answer here in the score key. So they find the page number, match it up, find the question numbers, work their way down, and if there is a question that's wrong, then we'll put an X right on top of that question number, okay? So an X on the question number. Then they go back to where they're working and look back in the PACE, find the correct answer with pen. They've done the PACE in pencil, by the way, not pen, in pencil, and that way they can neatly go back and erase the wrong answers, put the correct answer in, and then go back to the score key and check their work. If the answer is now correct, we'll put a circle around around the X to show that it has now been corrected. The other thing is that down here at the bottom of the page, we have a circle around the page number. That means that page has been scored and everything is correct. Then, when a student gets to the checkup, all right, before they're allowed to do the checkup, and I would encourage you to do this even if you're homeschooling, your student may not start the checkup until they've asked their monitor, supervisor, teacher, parent, whoever is overseeing their work, to initial it and even put a date there. It's not a bad idea. Now, what does that initial mean? Basically, it means that the teacher, the supervisor, has gone through the PACE and looked at all the pages to make sure that all the answers are there, nothing was skipped. Every answer has been scored, and if anything was marked wrong, it's been rescored. As a supervisor myself, I often will read some of those answers. I don't read every answer on every page, but I'll read them to see if the students are just fudging and making up answers or if they actually are being careful in their work. Then, before you allow them to start the checkup, just check with them, ask some questions, and see if they actually are confident and know the answers. In our school setting, if they're doing science or social studies, I require that they have some kind of a study guide, perhaps something they've printed out from Quizlet and that they've actually gone through to show me their score and that they know the material. Because I don't want them to start this checkup and get anything less than a 90%. So they should study it before they do it. I initial it, then they treat it like a test. Not allowed to look back, and they do that checkup. Afterwards, they take it back to the score key and score their work. So there is 100%, so this girl did well, and then I put my initials next to the score, and that just reminds me that I have looked at the score and know that they have passed with a passing score. And then they can go on and do the next section until they get all the way up to the self-test. All right? And again, I've initialed it so that she can do the self-test. After the self-test, she scored it, and then I would put my initials next to it. Now, I do it in a green pen. That's what we do in a school setting. You don't have to do that. But again, it's just a checkpoint that you know they have done well. Now, again, they get to this point, they finish the PACE, they've never seen the PACE test, they study the self-test, and they should go back and study the checkups as well. There always will be questions on the PACE tests from the checkups in addition to the self-test. But the self-test will be probably 70% or better, 70–80% of what's on the test. The other thing I should point out at the high school level in particular, 7th grade on up, is that these questions are going to be reworded. Something that had been blank on the self-test may now be one of the words that's supplied, and they're going to have a different word removed. Okay, it's still the same concept, still the same material, but they're being held accountable for it in a slightly different way. So make sure your student doesn't just memorize the words that they know fill in the blank on the self-test, or they're not going to be well prepared for the PACE test. I will point out too that in some of the high school level courses we do have some test tips at PACEsuccess.net, and those are the result of years and years and years of having students do PACE tests, and we have determined that there were certain questions that even my A students were always missing. In other words, it was not very obvious that they should know that for the PACE test. So the test tips don't give them the answer. We're not giving them the test question per se, but letting them know this is a content area that they ought to review before they take the PACE test in order to be better prepared for it. So once the student has studied, they turn the PACE into the parent. The parent then pulls the test out the next morning, and the student sits down and takes the PACE test, seeing it for the very first time. All right? So then, when they're done, the teacher, supervisor, parent grades the test. And again, for you as a parent, you need to know that in the middle of the score keys will be the test keys. Now, I've already taken it out of all of these because these are for the student to use when they're scoring their own work. But in the middle is a test key. So you need to pull that out before your child begins scoring. And again, keep that locked up where you have the tests, okay? And then after they have finished the PACE test, you score it. Say, well, what's the grade based on? ACE recommends that you just take the grade based on the PACE test, all right? Because the checkups and the pages that they've been working through has been totally for the purpose of helping them learn the material. So they usually don't do as well, perhaps, and they'll get some wrong, but then as they restudy those, they should be able to do much better on the PACE test. And so this is the control grade, because they can't see this in advance, and this determines then how well they really learned it. And that's the same for all the subjects. So as a parent, your record keeping is actually much easier. Just keep track of the 12 PACE test scores. At the end of the year, you just take those 12 scores, average them together, and you have one final grade for that course. One final note about the PACE tests here before we move on. And I did mention we want students to master the material. And so if a student on a PACE test gets less than 80%, okay, that is the absolute cutoff, You may even set a higher level of 85%. But if they get less than that, then have them go back and work through the whole PACE again. Buy a new copy of a blank PACE. We call that a failed PACE, but they're not just left failing. They're going to go through, work through it again, study harder, and do much better the second time through. Most students, I find, fail a PACE test because they were rushing through it. They weren't really trying to understand it. They were not studying adequately for every checkup and self-test, and so when they got to the PACE test, they really didn't know the content. Or maybe they were not even scoring correctly. We have found that students don't mark questions wrong that actually are wrong. Those are called scoring violations, and then they're not learning the right material. And so then on the test, they get those questions wrong. So take it seriously. If a student fails a test, don't just make excuses and let them go on. Have them go back and master it. And that's a good life skill, life lesson, and will motivate them to do much better as they continue on through the rest of the PACES. So I hope that gives you a good overview. And even if you're just doing one course, following these procedures will be very helpful. And I think your students will enjoy working through the PACES and feeling that level of accomplishment and achievement, and they will learn. There's a lot of review, a lot of drill, a lot of good vocabulary development that they'll get as they work through the PACES, and they will learn the material and do well and prepare them for college and for life. So I hope this video helped you. If you have any questions, visit pacesuccess.net, and perhaps you'll find some answers to your questions there.